A baby-faced drug kingpin. A glamorous girlfriend. And a £20 million drug empire crumbling in the blink of an eye. But how did two young Brits go from party nights in Amsterdam and Ibiza to facing decades behind bars? This isn't fiction. This is the real story of Eddie Burton and Sian Banks and the operation that could have flooded the UK with deadly drugs. It started like a love story, two young dreamers, chasing fast money and flashing lights. He was just 23. A baby-faced boy from Merseyside, once running errands for street dealers. She was 25. Stylish, loyal, and dangerously in love. Together, they built an empire. But it wasn't love that paid for the designer handbags, the first-class flights, the Ibiza villas. It was heroin. Cocaine. Ketamine. Over £20 million worth of poison, destined for the veins and streets of Britain. And every gram smuggled behind false panels and fuel tanks brought them closer to a luxury life and a life sentence. They used aliases. Encrypted phones. Hidden compartments. They outsmarted border checks and laughed from nightclubs while lorries rolled through Dover. But the thing about power. It makes you reckless. And in August 2023, under the strobe lights of Pasha Nightclub in Ibiza, it all fell apart. One moment he was sipping champagne under a fake name. The next, he was in handcuffs, exposed to the world. But who were Eddie Burton and Sian Banks, really? How did two kids become international traffickers, and how close did they come to getting away with it all? This isn't a movie. This isn't a warning. This is the true story of how a £20 million drug pipeline was built from Liverpool to Amsterdam and ended in a prison cell. This is Crimelines UK, real stories, real crimes. If true crime is your thing, if you want more chilling stories like this one, real criminals, real investigations, real consequences, then hit that subscribe button. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Merseyside. A city of contrast. Home to working-class resilience, and a long, blood-stained history of gangland rivalries, turf wars, and silent codes of loyalty. In the backstreets of Bootle and Kirkdale, opportunity doesn't knock. It whispers from behind corner shops, or inside trap houses where children run errands before they can write their own names. This is where Eddie Burton came of age. By the time most kids were starting high school, Eddie was already making drops for older boys' couriers who trusted him not because of his strength, but because of his invisibility. He was fast, quiet, and most importantly, forgettable. But Eddie wasn't content staying small. He watched. He learned. And by the time he hit his 20s, he wasn't running for anyone. He was building something. Something global. He'd never set foot in university. But he studied routes, risk, and reward like a Wall Street trader. Dover became his gate. Amsterdam, his source. And soon the UK became his market. Dover, the UK's busiest entry point. Over 10,000 vehicles pass through here every day. Most of them are clean. Some of them are carrying death. And Eddie knew just how to hide it inside toolboxes, car panels, and even fuel tanks engineered to fool X-rays. Sian Banks wasn't born into crime, but she was drawn to power. Friends described her as magnetic. Smart. Obsessed with loyalty. She met Eddie in 2020, and didn't just fall in love. She fell into the business. Within months, she was making trips to Amsterdam and Spain. On the surface, she was just another British tourist shopping, clubbing, posting filtered sunsets to Instagram. But behind her designer luggage, were kilos of cocaine and ketamine, ready to be pushed into cities from Birmingham to Glasgow. In June 2022, a routine stop at Dover uncovered 90 kilos of ketamine packed inside plastic containers, sealed tight and stashed between crates of commercial goods. It looked like a lucky break for border force. They didn't yet know this wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. Back in Liverpool, Eddie was quietly forming ties with local distributors. These weren't headline-making mobsters, they were clean-cut, soft-spoken operators. The type who wore tracksuits to meetings and kept their names off the streets. And from behind the scenes, Eddie became a shadow figure, respected, feared, and rarely seen. For a while, it worked. No violence. No noise. Just profit. They were young, charismatic, and fearless. But behind the glitz was a criminal machine, feeding addiction and violence across the country. And it was just getting started. In Merseyside's forgotten corners, where job centers replaced factories, and ambition was measured in ounces, not diplomas, a boy named Eddie Burton was learning the language of survival. He was 10 years old the first time he sold drugs. No fake beard. No decoy. Just a child, already fluent in the hustle. He didn't inherit money or mentors, he inherited risk. His neighborhood saw what he was doing. But no one intervened. Teachers described him as distracted, distant. The streets described him differently, reliable. "He's a tear away," said his grandmother years later. I think he was selling drugs. So it's not that surprising what's happened to him. Merseyside's gang ecosystem is tightly wound, and brutal. Kids are used for errands. Then as runners. By 16, Eddie wasn't running for anyone. He was building his own crew. He had no tattoos. No flashy threats. His weapon was his calm. Observers described him as baby-faced but razor-sharp. Then came Sian. She wasn't from the estates. She came from Instagram. A wannabe influencer, building a fantasy from filters and borrowed dresses, until fantasy needed funding. Friends say she knew exactly what she was doing. She always wanted more, but it was never enough. That search for more led her straight to Eddie. They met through mutual connections in Liverpool's underground party scene. The attraction was instant. To Eddie, she was a mask, someone who could polish the image. To Sian, Eddie was access, the key to a real luxury lifestyle. Together, they stopped looking like criminals. They looked like tourists with excellent taste. While Eddie coordinated routes through mainland Europe, Sian built a personal brand, a Trojan horse in heels. She didn't just know how to move weight. She knew how to disappear in plain sight. By 20, Eddie was no longer just a dealer. He was a strategist. A smuggler. A recruiter. He studied customs patterns like a businessman studies the stock market. His empire was low profile, high profit, until ego crept in. From broken estates to private villas, the rise was undeniable. But while Eddie grew more confident, he also grew more careless. We told him he was pushing it. The flying. The girls. The photos. But he thought he was untouchable. And Sian. She wasn't trying to stop him. She was helping him go faster. To the outside world, they were influencers. But behind the scenes, they were architects of a growing drug empire, and every empire, no matter how polished, is built on borrowed time. By mid-2022, Eddie Burton wasn't just running drugs. He was moving weight. Tens of kilos at a time, packed in lorries, sealed in modified tanks, driven through the UK's front gate without a flicker of suspicion. June 2022. Border Force officers at Dover intercepted a lorry that looked like any other. But hidden inside, behind crates labeled as industrial equipment, was 90 kilos of ketamine and over 50 kilos of high-purity cocaine. Estimated street value? Over £9 million. August 2022, 2 months later, another bust. 142 kilos of cocaine. 25 kilos of heroin. This time concealed in a custom-engineered fuel tank. Burton didn't just rely on volume. He relied on precision. Every lorry was modified by professionals. Every courier trained to pass undetected. Some were paid. Others were threatened. One former courier, who later turned informant, claimed he was told it was car parts until he noticed the smell. "You don't forget that smell," he said. They promised £4,000. Said no one ever gets caught. But behind the coordination was something far more advanced: encrypted communication. Eddie Burton and his associates were using EncroChat, the encrypted phone network once trusted by Europe's most dangerous criminal networks. Code names. GPS tags. Silent dispatches. No phone numbers. No faces. Just logistics. While Eddie moved weight, Sian Banks managed movement. She flew to Amsterdam. Booked apartments under aliases. Packed drugs inside luggage with vacuum-sealed layers to avoid detection. She handled the cash, hundreds of thousands at a time. She laundered it through shell businesses, designer purchases, even cryptocurrency. From the outside, they were living the dream. First-class flights. Selfies in Pasha Ibiza. Designer bags from Milan. Friends described them as flash, but few knew how deep the money ran. Their lifestyle was fueled by poison, and powered by silence. But like every high, the crash was inevitable. By late 2022, the business was booming, too fast. Cash was harder to hide. Couriers were getting sloppy. And the EncroChat network? Compromised. In a massive international sting, European police had cracked the uncrackable. Thousands of conversations, once encrypted, now exposed. The NCA had names. Locations. Routes. And Eddie Burton's was on the list. From that moment, the countdown began. But they didn't stop. They doubled down. One last shipment. One last payday. They had no idea they were already under watch. No idea that every move, every call, every click, was being logged. The empire they built was about to collapse. Not with a shootout. But with a knock at the door. Once the drugs were seized at Dover, the National Crime Agency finally had the proof they needed: fingerprints and DNA traced back to Eddie Burton. But catching a ghost is never easy. Burton disappeared almost overnight. Gone from Liverpool streets, vanished into the network of European cities where traffickers hide in plain sight. The investigation became a race against time. Every flight Sian Banks took was scrutinized. A pattern emerged. Amsterdam to Spain, back to the UK, always under the radar. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a vital link. Encrypted messages through networks like EncroChat offered glimpses into their operation. "You've never been nicked or had ye prints took anyway, so doesn't matter," Burton told Banks, revealing their cold confidence in the face of the law. The NCA worked alongside European counterparts, Dutch customs, Spanish police, German federal agents, a multinational chess game aimed at closing every exit route. They followed the trail of lorries, forged documents, hidden compartments. Each shipment was a link in the chain, each seizure a small victory, but the real prize, Eddie Burton, remained elusive. Investigators knew Burton was playing a dangerous game. Balancing his lavish lifestyle with extreme caution. But overconfidence can be a fatal flaw. Months of relentless surveillance and intelligence gathering wore down the network. Every flight logged, every message decrypted, every movement tracked, bringing the net tighter. The question was no longer if, but when. Ibiza, the playground for the world's rich and reckless. A place where the music never stops, and secrets hide beneath the flashing lights. It was here, amidst the glamour and chaos, that Eddie Burton thought he was untouchable. Pasha wasn't just a nightclub, it was a fortress of excess. With its iconic cherry logo glowing in the night, it attracted celebrities, DJs, and those who wanted to disappear into the crowd. For months, undercover agents tracked Burton's movements, piecing together his network from intercepted messages and informants. His confidence grew, fueled by luxury cars, designer clothes, and nights that blurred into dawn. But that night in August 2023, the music would stop for Eddie Burton. As the DJ spun the beats, officers silently moved through the crowd, their target finally in sight. Burton's alias couldn't save him. The man who masterminded a multi-million-pound drug empire was handcuffed not in some dark alley, but under the flashing disco lights. He was arrested at the club, surrounded by flashing lights and the sounds of music fading into the background. The arrest was swift, a culmination of years of international collaboration and intelligence gathering. Yet, the story didn't end there. Earlier, in December 2023, Sian Banks had been apprehended at Liverpool John Lennon Airport. Authorities had been tracking her movements, linking her to Burton's operations. She had been facilitating smuggling operations, often carrying drugs concealed in her luggage, and laundering illicit funds. Her arrest was a significant breakthrough. It provided investigators with crucial insights into Burton's network and operations. While Burton was the face of the operation, Banks was its backbone. Together, they had orchestrated a £20 million drug trafficking empire. Their arrests marked the beginning of the end for their criminal activities. Following their arrests, coordinated raids across Europe led to the dismantling of their network. Warehouses filled with drugs, encrypted communication devices, and large sums of cash were seized. The media buzzed with reports of the takedown. Headlines labeled it one of the most significant drug busts in recent years, highlighting the international efforts involved. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams remarked, "This operation was a testament to the power of international cooperation." Burton and Banks thought they could outsmart the system, but justice prevailed. For the communities affected by their actions, the arrests brought a sense of justice and hope. Families who had lost loved ones to drug-related incidents felt a renewed sense of faith in the system. The takedown of Eddie Burton and Sian Banks was more than just the capture of two criminals. It was a victory for justice, a message that no matter how deep one hides, the law will find a way. February 2025. After nearly 2 years of investigations, international manhunts, and high-stakes surveillance, Eddie Burton and Sian Banks finally faced justice inside the walls of Canterbury Crown Court. Burton, once the untouchable, baby-faced drug baron, now a man fighting to keep control as the world watched. He pleaded guilty to 4 serious charges, importing Class A drugs, including cocaine and heroin, alongside significant amounts of Class B substances. Banks, Burton's partner in crime, admitted to 7 charges. These included importing Class A drugs, laundering millions of pounds through complex financial schemes, and conspiring to conceal criminal property. The prosecution laid bare the scale of the operation. Over 250 kilograms of cocaine, heroin, and ketamine had been smuggled into the UK, with a street value exceeding £20 million. Judge Andrew McCallum described the pair as central figures in a ruthless network whose actions risked devastating countless lives and communities across the country. NCA Commander John Turner said, "This conviction sends a powerful message that no one is beyond the reach of the law. The drugs they trafficked would have flooded the streets and destroyed families." For those on the front lines of the drug crisis, the trial was deeply personal. "Every kilogram of drugs that made it through affects lives," said Sarah Jenkins, a recovery counselor in Liverpool. Burton and Banks weren't just criminals, they were architects of heartbreak. The sentencing reflected the gravity of their crimes, Burton received a 19-year prison sentence, while Banks was given 14 years, with orders to forfeit millions in assets. The public reaction was mixed, relief that justice was served, but frustration over the ongoing drug epidemic. The trial closed a chapter on Burton's empire but left behind a community still grappling with the fallout. Families mourned, advocates called for stronger intervention, and police vowed to keep fighting the war on drugs. For Eddie Burton and Sian Banks, the party was over. But for the communities left behind, the battle to heal was only just beginning. With Eddie Burton and Sian Banks behind bars, a violent chapter in the UK's drug trade came to a close. But the story didn't end there. What happens when a kingpin falls, and who fills the vacuum left behind? When big players go down, smaller crews try to step up. It's like a game of chess, someone's always waiting to make their move. Law enforcement didn't rest after the takedown. The National Crime Agency revamped border security, tightening checks at Dover and other key ports. Surveillance methods improved, with better data sharing between European agencies. Yet, beyond enforcement, the battle is fought in the neighborhoods. Local activists and charities stepped up efforts to support vulnerable youth, aiming to break the cycle that pulled Eddie Burton into crime in the first place. Leaders like Marcus Reed emphasize prevention over punishment. If we don't offer real opportunities and hope, young people will always turn to crime for survival and status. Experts say the roots of these criminal empires are tangled in poverty, neglect, and social exclusion. Eddie's story is not unique, it's the product of broken systems and unheard voices. The silence around these estates isn't just absence of noise, it's fear, loyalty, and unspoken rules. A silence that echoes through every corner of Britain where drugs and gangs thrive. This wasn't just about drugs, it was about power, fear, and silence. And breaking that silence might be the only way to stop the cycle for good. So we ask, was justice truly served, or are there deeper shadows still lurking beneath the surface? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. If you want more gripping true crime stories that pull back the curtain on Britain's darkest secrets, subscribe now.